Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Standoff, the series where we compare similar stands from JoJo to see who comes out on top. So in the most recent arc of JoJo's latest manga, we were greeted to a funky little guy called Bagsgroove, a stand whose ability was extremely reminiscent of Lovers from Stardust Crusaders, which was definitely a blast from the past in a microscopic stand fight where the enemy is attacking from within the body and our heroes have to use their own stands to go in after it. Although the Bagsgroove arc is written nearly 35 years since the Lovers, so we got to see Araki give a whole new take on this type of stand with a completely different attack method. So before we get into things, this video will be very spoiler light for part 9, as I understand not everyone may be completely caught up, so I won't be mentioning any specific plot details, but obviously will have to show panels from the manga that include some of the other stands from part 9, and a lot of Usagi suffering, who is the character that's primarily being targeted during this fight. But if you just want to learn about the new stand and how it compares to Lovers and aren't extremely spoiler sensitive, you'll totally be good. So getting into this matchup, let's start with the OG, Lovers.
I'm Dan of Steel, and none of you can take me down. You don't have what it takes.
Lovers is a semi-sentient long-range type stand that takes the form of a microscopic invertebrate that's somewhere in between an insect and a crustacean, that's able to infiltrate the human body and uses its relatively large claws to manipulate their target's brainstem, specifically targeting pain receptors, but will also be able to use them to defend against other stands. The main attack method for Lovers is entering their target's body imperceivably, usually through the ear, and just beelining it straight for the brainstem. The user Steely Dan will then confidently present himself to the enemy and provokes them into attacking, which triggers Lover's main ability of mirroring and amplifying the damage incurred by the user back to the target. This ability would seem to be based off of its namesake, the Lover's Tarot card, which symbolizes a bond forming between two people, as the stand links the user to their target and will sadistically torment those who care about them, as Steely Dan forces Jotaro to perform indulgent and humiliating acts, like giving him a back rub and using him as a human bridge, threatening to hurt his grandfather Joseph if he refuses. So the stand really only works as intended if Steely Dan is able to exploit one's love for another. If Jotaro was a complete sociopath, he could just kill Steely at any moment. He's completely defenseless outside of exploiting those emotional bonds and morality, often using his targets like hostages. So the way Steely uses Lovers is kinda similar to Highway to Hell from part 6, although the whole concept of mirroring and amplifying the damage is mostly just a form of defense to protect the user, as the stand will slowly tear away at brain tissue if given enough time, as Steely says at one point that Joseph is going to die in less than a minute, implying that the stand is able to attack on its own unless he just planned on headbutting a wall as hard as he could or something. So at range, he's not remotely operating Lovers, it's automatic in the sense that it interprets the user's pain receptors and mimics the damage, although when acting outside of its standard attack method does have a fairly high level of sentience, as when it's confronted by Silver Chariot and Hierophant Green, it intelligently defends itself. Assessing the threat, makes an analogy of its power to Aesop's fable of the tortoise and the hare, and uses its ability to multiply, creating dozens of clones out of brain tissue, even disguising itself as other stands, while Steely Dan seems completely oblivious to what's actually going on in Joseph's body, until he sustains an attack directly on his stand, which transfers damage 1-to-1 and causes it to automatically retreat, which shows us just how fast this stand is, and with its small size, extremely difficult to pinpoint, allowing it to quickly swap between bodies. So when breaking down all of Lover's capabilities, it's probably stronger than you remember, and it would seem its biggest downside is Steely Dan, as the way he injects himself into the situation subjugates him to needless risk, solely to enjoy being cruel and go on a power trip bullying around others who are clearly much stronger than him physically. Maybe a result of Dio's influence and some insecurity, and Steely Dan wants to use his own ability to create this short-lived fantasy where he can mimic a fraction of Dio's power and have his own subordinates, as he did use some of Dio's power, being bestowed with flesh buds that he could implant in people and use Lovers to accelerate their growth, which he tried with Joseph but were quickly destroyed with Hamon, but I always forget that it was Steely Dan that killed Enya using this method. So if only Steely Dan wasn't such an egotistical asshole, he easily could have stayed hidden and inflicted himself with pain, or wait for Lovers to slowly work away at brain tissue, turning this arc into a find the stand user style fight. Although I do think it would have been a lot less enjoyable if Steely was using his stand optimally, and we never would have gotten the Jotaro bridge. So sometimes Araki has got to write his characters a bit flawed and naive or just sadistic to have more fun with the story, and all of the crap Jotaro had to put up with culminates in one of the most satisfying beatdowns in the series.
Your receipt. You can keep the freaking change.
Jumping forward now 5 parts later and into an alternate universe, we have Lulu, an 11-year-old spoiled brat from Hawaii who possesses the stand Bag's Groove, a completely automatic long-range colony-type stand that takes the form of a microscopic scuba-diving insect-like creature with a blend of organic and mechanical design elements that give the stand a deep-sea diver look, as the stand needs to quickly travel throughout the body in order to perform its attack and swims through the blood vessels. And I love this thing's little chicken feet with each toe being a foot with shoes on, giving it a pretty goofy look sometimes. The stand's name is in reference to the Miles Davis album Bag's Groove, which is a performance of the original composition created by Milton Baggs Jackson, and would go on to become a jazz standard, playing into the colony aspect of the stand, many different stands like the many different performances of its namesake, as well as the romanization of Bag's Groove can also come out as Bug's Groove, which could be a little pun referring to its design being a groovy bug. So getting into the ability now, as previously mentioned, it's a long-range automatic stand that acts to mimic natural illnesses. And I mean, this thing is fully automatic. This is a set it and forget it style stand where the user is in charge of protecting sensitive documents and was able to just place her stand in between the pages of them and effortlessly keep them there at all times, acting as a trap set to take out anyone who lays eyes on the pages. Its range is never specified, but we could easily estimate it as the entire island of Oahu, as the stand is always active and continues to attack while Lulu is tracking down her target while being in completely different parts of the city. So I would think its range is very similar to Lover's, which was hundreds of kilometers. So once the colony is unleashed, it will infiltrate the body of anyone who looks at the pages imperceivably, and begin to perform a very specific set procedure of attacks that mimic the symptoms of natural illnesses, and slowly progress until the target dies. So pretty much the exact opposite of how Lover's was used, as the whole point of Bag's Groove is to be completely imperceptible and make the victim's death look like natural causes, to avoid any suspicion towards the documents and of course to take out anyone snooping around them. The Bag's Grooves will start by locating the lungs and make a puncture in the pulmonary artery, attacking through a series of stand barrages, causing the affected to throw up a cloudy sludge and restrict their breathing, which on its own could be deadly, although if the target survives, the stand will continue to the heart and brain, causing bleeding from the eyes and ears, and from that point on quickly deteriorates cognitive function. So the trade-off for the stand's incredible range and ease of use is that it cannot think for itself, deviate from its procedure, or really defend itself at all, being very dull and slow. Having been stopped by Big Mouth strikes again and smooth operators, neither stands that are particularly strong physically. Although when biological material comes in contact with the stand's body, it causes cancerous cells to spread rapidly, as Charming Man tries to attack the stand with his fragmented eye, and it forms a tumor in his eye socket, and this is the main form of defense, but it doesn't work on manifested stands. So as long as you maintain distance from the user and are able to identify where the attacks are coming from with something like an MRI machine, it is possible to neutralize and destroy the stand with another stand. But like Lover's, damage will transfer to the user, although since it's a colony stand, destroying one Bag's Groove isn't that serious, and just gives Lulu a bloody nose, which, if anything, is almost helpful as it gives her intel on the enemy, confirming their stand users, and allows her to approach a bit more tactically. But it's when Lulu tracks down her target that things get a lot more overpowered, as this little girl is probably the last person you'd expect to be the stand user, and she can simply implant more stands if she gets close, or attach her stand to an object and roll it over to you. And it's when you have a whole colony of Bag's Groove attacking that you're pretty much screwed. Really, the only counterattack to this is to notice Lulu taking damage and go after her directly. So unless the target notices that connection, Lulu can remain completely undetected. And in her arc, we don't even really find a solution to the stand. It's only after Lulu is emotionally broken that they automatically deactivate, running back to comfort her, which was really lucky because by the end of this arc, she had infected almost every member of the team. And as it stands, Lulu is still an active character in the story, so this is just everything we know about her ability as of chapter 24, but what we saw in this arc seemed pretty comprehensive. So with an understanding of both of the stand's capabilities, let's get into the comparison. And honestly, I really love this matchup, and I think it's one of the closest episodes we've ever had, as each stand is so well balanced by their strengths and limitations. So with Lover's, I think its biggest strength has to be adaptability. Not only can it remain in a body undetected as long as the user doesn't reveal themselves, if Joseph just started taking damage randomly, I don't think the game's first thought would have been to go inside his brain. But even when exposed, it does a really well job of warding off threats, and if it wasn't for Hierophant Green's detection cheese, I think it would have been able to continue working while using the decoys, as they would have just kept multiplying. Although by far its biggest drawback, besides its ass of a user of course, is simply the fact that there is only one true stand. Sure, the decoys are nice, but they're little more than just goo balls, so no matter what, levers could only affect one person at a time, which doesn't make it terrible, just really slow and inefficient when dealing with a group. And whatever approach you choose, either staying hidden or going in directly and taking a hostage, you're gonna give their teammates time to problem solve, and are at so much risk when you have one stand and it transfers 1-to-1 damage back to you, especially when you're going up against Star Platinum. So Bagsgroove is really the complete inverse of Lovers, where its strength is in numbers that can overwhelm a single target or group, while its downside is having zero intellect, adaptability, or defense, which might make it seem pretty bad. It's slow, dumb, easily destroyed, and the user has absolutely no control over them. But even with all of those drawbacks, its automatic procedure seems good enough, as the thing is going to be constantly on the move, extremely difficult to pinpoint, and always attacking. And simply the fact that Lulu could just walk by a group of people or plant her stand on an object is so OP, and functionally makes her stand more like an infectious virus than a Lover-style microorganism. It's almost like Araki realized this stand is pretty broken and avoided writing a direct counter to it, and instead relied on the flaws of the user, which was Lulu's emotional vulnerability, as even with an MRI and stands that could enter the body, the crew just couldn't overcome its power. So Lulu should be taken into account as an overall weakness of the stand, which is a fair trade-off as it's most powerful when close to its user, but that also opens her up to danger, as she could be seen taking damage or just emotionally disrupted. But the odds of either of those things happening drop substantially if Lulu was working alone and intentionally kept out of sight. So when viewing both of these stands in a typical JoJo arc context of one minor villain versus a group, I'm gonna have to give that W to Bagsgroove, as the colony aspect of the stand, its ease of use, and the user's proclivity to attack stealthily is just way too good. Although in a matchup of Lulu versus Steely Dan in a one-on-one situation, Lovers wins that fight all day, as even if Lulu infects Steely at a distance, as soon as he feels something wrong inside his body, he could most likely send in Lovers to investigate and would be able to destroy a single Bagsgroove with ease. And if Lulu does manage to get close and sends in the whole colony, I still think Lovers just tears right through those things, especially with its ability to make clones. And all of this damage Lulu would be taking would surely expose her and allow Steely to send in Lovers to attack. And even though he would have to remove Lovers and stop defending himself, once it's inside Lulu, any further damage Bagsgroove cause will be mirrored and amplified, ensuring that it kills her before him, essentially using her own stand against her, which is kind of the perfect counter to Bagsgroove. So if Lovers is able to enter Lulu, it's an automatic GG. And that's going to be the results of today's standoff. But of course, let me know your guys' take on this matchup, if you thought of another way things could play out, or maybe I didn't give a stand enough credit in a certain aspect of their ability. So be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you all real soon in a new video. Until then, peace.